All right. Welcome to another episode of Deal Makers. Today is going to be fun because I am inviting not only one of my good friends, but a fellow commercial real estate landlord and investor extraordinaire, Mr. Shawn Johanson. Let's see if I can bring him in right now here. Boom! Shawnee, welcome to the program.
Hey, buddy. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too. This is so funny because I know you so well and you become one of my closest friends because of commercial real estate. And so the last couple episodes, we've had some awesome commercial real estate brokers on. But here we're going to talk about what you and I do, week in and week out as landlords. And I think before we begin, let's take a moment for anyone who doesn't know you. Give them kind of the quick 30-second, elevator from your humble beginnings to, the lavish lifestyle that you get to live today. And tell us a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, first of all, just thanks for having me on. I've watched your other LinkedIn stuff. I mean, like you said, we've been good friends for a long time now. And it's been great. I mean, especially that last video that you did with your broker. Dropping some gold, like I said, on that. So love listening to it. Thanks for putting it on. As for myself, came from a single mom. She worked her butt off, working 2 jobs to kind of support our family. I saw that hustle, which really made me really want to do something big with my life. And, it took me a while to really figure out what I wanted to do. I always knew I wanted to own my own business, but it took me a while, and finally started doing some real estate and, did residential just like you did, to get started. Did some flipping, residential rentals, and then found a really good mentor to start doing commercial real estate. And obviously that's where we met in our group. And, the rest has been history. The last 10 years, I guess it's already been. Man, time flies.
You spring chicken, you.
I know. As you can see, the crow's feet. Yeah.
Let's do this. Almost everyone out there who invests in real estate stays in the single family realm, right? They either have rentals or they do some flips or maybe some wholesale deals. But you took the leap to get into commercial. Why, or what attracted you to that versus the house flipping or the rental business?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, we were, plugging along and we got in right in 2008 doing that. So we were right after the bubble happened. So it was great. We had all these great properties to look at and to do it. And, it was fine. Like the profits were good, but we always wanted a little bit more. We wanted those, as you say, the extra commas and zeros. And so we were looking for something else. We took a couple classes on commercial real estate and they were okay. They kind of gave you the basics. And then, we were able to find a really good class to go to, the Commercial Academy. And that really kind of opened or had a big light bulb for us.
Right.
I want that, kind of a thing. And so that's what really attracted me to commercial real estate. Thought I was going to be this big multifamily, investor, because that's where everybody goes. You go from single family homes to apartments, it just seems like the natural progression.
Yeah. And
as people in the group started talking about retail, I just fell way more in love with that than I did with residential.
Well, and I kind of think of apartment buildings as a subset of commercial real estate, especially the bigger deals. But, you brought up an interesting point. A lot of people get into apartments or they start with a 4-plex and then 8 units and 12 and so forth. But you've kind of gone down this almost niche path of retail. Do you want to get into that a little bit specifically? Like what drew you into that asset class versus, let's say, doing a 200-unit apartment building? Because that's what I see almost everyone out there doing who gets into bigger commercial deals. They go syndicate this with dozens of partners and they buy deals where they can bump rents or lower the expenses a little bit. But you've done something a little bit different or maybe contrarian. You read the headlines about retail these days and it could give someone the willies if they don't understand what's going on. So what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, a lot of people just kind of see that natural progression of going from that, 4-plex to on. And, that's really what we were looking at. I mean, our first deal that we probably second deal we put an LOI in on was a big apartment building. I think it was like 330 units out in like North Carolina. And I flew out there. I started doing due diligence on it. And as I was there, it was like, you get that gut feeling. I was like, this isn't really for me. You know, first of all, I didn't necessarily want to be across the country at that time. I was just starting out. I needed to be back home. And that's where I really learned, like, okay, I'm going to invest in my backyard. And I know that's something that you would love to do, but you're in California, so it's a little harder. Not that there's not deals there, but but you've done very well in Arizona. So I kind of dialed it back, and I started looking for apartments here, but there just wasn't a lot of good stuff out there. There was a lot of, I guess you'd call it D-class, war zone air ones. And I didn't want to do that. I had some residential rentals in those areas, and it just wasn't great. So what really attracted me to retail is the ease of managing. I mean, these tenants, this is their life that they're doing, at least if you have a lot of local tenants in your plazas, which I do have a lot of those in there, and they fight. I mean, just during COVID alone, you could really see the fight in them versus these nationals. I talked to a lot of my friends who have nationals in there, and they're like, yeah, these guys just said, I'm not paying, kind of a thing. And I'm like, whoa, like, I don't even have that. Like when I talk to my tenants, they're like, oh my God, Shawn, like, I don't know what I'm going to do during this thing. And we work together on figuring out a good solution to be able to make it work for them and for us. So that was one of the things I really liked. I love that they have pride of ownership. Even though they don't own the building, they keep everything clean. They pay for all the CAM charges. They pay for, to fix up the building, to make it look nice. I don't have to do that like you do in residential. So it's all included in there. It's bundled in. They also pay for a manager. If you don't want to manage it, I personally manage it, but you could hire a property manager and they pay for it. That's what really made me fall in love with it.
Yeah. There's some really special characteristics with a triple net lease that allows you to have, an almost completely hands-off experience if you want to.
Exactly.
I'm seeing some great comments coming in here from Rita and Chris, which reminds me to remind everybody, if you're watching live, please don't hesitate to say hello. Tell us where you're tuning in from, and hit Shawn with the Shawn and Shawn Show. Hit us with some questions. We've been talking about that for a long time. Or comments on what he's sharing, and we'd love to get into some of those live here. We have the ability to do that. That's one of the great benefits. So one other thing that we talked about a little bit was, how you structure a deal. Actually, well, let me do this. Chris brought up a question. Let's tackle this one first. Do you think it's wise for someone to start in commercial real estate? That's kind of fascinating. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, I've had this question a lot of times from local investors that have heard about me and have called me up and asked me this question. So it's a great question, Chris. Usually what I give them is, if you are educated in anything, you can do well in it. So if you don't know what you don't know, I wouldn't say it's the best place to start. I would say if you don't have a good mentor or a good coaching program to be able to go through to get to know the ins and outs of it, then start in residential and work your way up like Shawn and I did. If you have a good mentorship or something like that I've been able to have, and or good people like Shawn or myself to be able to help guide you in the process, that can speed up your process where you don't have to go through that residential. And it's a great way to start if you have that backing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think, Chris, I would add to that, a single transaction in commercial, at least for me, equated to, a dozen rental houses, and it created that same cash flow in one pop. And so that's certainly something to consider, although you got to be pretty well capitalized. And, Shawn, that's another interesting point to bring up. You don't come from a ton of money. You're not, the third generation commercial real estate investor. You started with, relatively little. How does someone go buy a 7-figure building? What did you do in the beginning? And even what does that look like today? You might have the ability to write a 7-figure check, but that's not generally how you structure deals. So maybe you want to share, how you involve partners in this process.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I started from a humble background, like I said, single mom. We didn't have much at all. And, just kind of got into it when I started looking at it. I had some money saved up. I was working for GE Capital at the time, so I was making decent money at that point in my life. So we started out small, doing some flips, and we actually bought the house next to us as a rental. It was foreclosure. I think we bought it for like 80,000. So I started small and started putting money down. And then once I started flipping more, people started hearing about what I was doing and asking me how to do it. And as I was telling them that, they were like, "Well, can I invest with you?" Uh, and I was like, "Sure, yeah, like let's do it," kind of a thing. So I started off with like 10,000 here, 10,000 there. And then as I kind of built up my career and my background, and could show them that I could give them back their money after a certain point, they started doing more. It started being 20, 40, 50,000. Then when I started in commercial, I kind of rolled all those people over and said, "Hey, I'm no longer doing residential, but I can roll you into these commercial deals where you can get a bigger return on your investment than what I'm giving you already and be part of the deal with me." So that's kind of what it looks like right now. I've built up, a pretty good size investor pool of people who like investing in the assets that I like to do.
So you bring up a really good point, and I didn't realize this world existed in the beginning of my journey. I'm guessing, most busy professionals out there who are focused on their careers or their day jobs haven't thought about spearheading their own deal. But I don't know if that's necessarily the best path for a lot of people. If someone's looking for more of a passive investment, where, they're writing a check or sending a wire, and they can own a piece of a deal. Do you want to explain that structure a little bit more? Because that's probably new for a lot of people tuning in. There's people who lend on debt, but that's not generally how you and I are structuring our commercial deals. So maybe give us a little bit more detail on what that looks like.
Yeah, so I mean, most of our deals, we always bring in partners on our deal. So it depends on the investment. Sometimes it can be as low as 25,000. Other deals, it's a minimum of $100,000 to get in on a deal, and you can get usually anywhere between 2% on a really big deal, up to maybe 5 or 6% of the deal, depending on how much you want to invest. I mean, if you want to bring the whole capital stack along with investing with us, you could be looking at anywhere between 20 and 40, 50% of the deal, depending on the deal structure. And you become a partner with us now, of course, because I have the background in doing what I do, and I've been educated and everything. I'm going to be the point man. I'm going to do everything for you. So you're just going to kind of sit back and kind of enjoy the returns while I go find the deal. I manage it. I lease it up. And then, when it's time to exit or whatever the exit strategy is, whether it's a refinance or, a sale, I execute all those for our team. And then we basically reap the profits together as partners.
Right. And so someone's literally kicking back and they're getting, that mailbox money or the direct deposits or the quarterly distributions that are coming in from the cash flow of that building. Or if you go to sell, the profit, or if you refinance, and you pull some cash out, that would get proportionally distributed among that ownership group.
Yeah, I kind of like think of it as like when I was flipping houses, like all my friends were like, "Why are you not like doing the work yourself? Why are you not tiling the bathroom?" And I was like, because I don't have 10 years of my life to give to learn how to do the skill of a tile layer. Plus, I'm going to have to invest in all the tools and everything else that are going to get me there. So why waste my time doing all that when I'm not even interested in doing it? Why didn't I utilize somebody else who's already put their life and their blood and sweat and everything into it to get to that point? So that's kind of what I do. I put, the last 10 years of learning this business ins and outs so that I could be the point guy, and you just kind of like hire me technically to go out and do the work for you,
I should have done this in the beginning, but for those who don't know you, why don't you share, the volume of deals that you've done is pretty impressive, and there's folks who do this with like a huge fund and pensions at like an institutional level, but you're an independent investor who's been able to buy how many commercial buildings over your career now?
Yeah, we've done 16 properties in the 10 years that we've been doing this. Some years in the beginning it was kind of lean. There was one year we didn't even do one deal just because we were just kind of learning and whatnot like that. So it's been a great process and um, a learning process for us, to get to where we are now. We've got our little niche that we call it in our small group. We call it the Johanson model. And we know what we do and we do it well, and we just focus in and laser and do it. And not that we don't look at outside of that, that kind of box,
right?
But we know what we do and what we do well.
Okay, let's dissect that a little bit more. Tell us about the Johanson model, and you can reflect back and say, most of the deals that we've bought have been, what size and shape, and they're creating, a 7-figure profit in some cases. So maybe you can explain that, because I would think for investors listening in, what does a deal look like for you? What have you done in the past? What are you looking for tomorrow on the next deal? So let's start with that, and then we'll keep going.
Yeah, I mean, really, our ideal deal looks like 10 to 60,000 square feet. You're going to be looking somewhere around, anywhere 70 to 90% occupancy. I want some decent traffic counts. They don't have to be huge. Obviously, the better car count, the better for us. But I've done it as low as 12,000 cars out in front of it. I prefer to be in the 20 if we can. Usually that $1 to $5 million range has been perfect. One of the things I've figured out, especially recently, if I buy something in the $4 to $5 million range, and then I do what I do, I fix it up, I put tenants in there, and I go to resell it in the $7 million range, you're kind of in that tweener spot where it's too big for the small guys like myself that buy stuff, but it's too little for the REITs to go out and buy. So it's a little harder to find those buyers to buy your end product once I fix it up. So that's why I like to stay in that $1 to $5 million range. And I mean, it's not rocket science. I mean, it's a lot like when I was flipping houses. The curb appeal is the number one thing. You get it, your outside looking perfect so you can attract those tenants.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's not rocket science, really.
Do you want to share the markets that you focus on? I know you're fortunate where, in your backyard, a lot of the deals pencil and make sense, but you've recently expanded beyond your backyard. So let us know what markets you're in and why you're excited about those markets.
Yeah, so going back to, kind of that North Carolina thing, figuring out. So I really focused originally in Minnesota, and kind of got a couple of deals there. And then I expanded to Wisconsin as my wife is from there. We have boots on the ground there. So
what'd she say? Go Pack?
Yeah, go Pack, go is what she says. I say boo, but yeah, so Minnesota, Wisconsin's been a good chunk of what I've done. I've built some great relationships with some great brokers, and that can find me deals there, and also with some bird dogs that have been able to, utilize them to find deals. And then just recently I've kind of started expanding my territory into Texas. Met a couple of fine gentlemen that really knew what they were doing and knew the area, but needed a little help. That was their first deal. So, I went in on a deal with them there, and just loving the Texas market. So I'm working in there. I met some pretty good people in the Missouri area. So I'm looking there also. Potentially thinking about maybe moving to Florida. So I'm looking at the Florida market also. Got some great friends out there too. So really trying to conquer the world.
I like it. There is a question here that's kind of relevant from Jen. What do you think would be the best way to find your investment in Dallas? Speaking of Texas, right? We're looking at both residential and commercial. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, a lot of my deals come from broker relationships. So I think it's finding those good brokers that want to work with you. We also do like letter campaigns to try and find, sending it out to shopping center owners. I think Shawn and I, we've both started like calling on retail centers that are for lease and asking if they're willing to sell. Obviously, if they have vacancy, it fits our portfolio. That's just a couple of the things that we do to try and find deals. And then sometimes, just partnering with other people is another way to break into, that market and figure out how it's done.
So actually, you mentioned something about bird dogs. I think we should elaborate a little bit more. Like, not necessarily bird dogging, but when you've partnered with a few people, what might that look like if someone is interested or they think they've got a warm lead, but they don't have the resume or the track record or the cash or the balance sheet or the ability to guarantee the loan? You've done deals with partners now where you guys have basically come together and taken down larger deals that might not otherwise have been possible for a beginning investor or someone who just doesn't have enough capital to pull it off on their own. Joint venturing is pretty common on these larger deals. You might hear it called syndications, but in some cases it's just a handful of partners coming together. So do you want to kind of explain that process for anyone out there who might be either interested in partnering with you, or they found a deal and they don't have all the pieces of the puzzle?
Yeah, I think it works perfectly. I mean, like I said, in regards to the Texas deal, these two gentlemen, they were just starting to get into the commercial realm. They had a good basis of what they were looking for and had good knowledge, but they didn't really know what they don't know, from 10 years of experience that I can bring, or, what have you done doing like 7 years that you've been in the business? So it's something that I can bring to it, and that they can bring the deal and maybe that local, investors. And usually what I tell them, the more that you do, the more equity is going to be shared. If I have to do all the work, I'm going to take a little bit bigger of the chunk. You're still going to get a good deal, and you're going to get the deal done. And I think it's a win-win for everybody, kind of thing. But the bird dog kind of thing, I guess you call it bird dog or a partnership or whatever you want to call it, is really what I'm looking for is somebody who needs my help. The management skills, the maybe the financing part, because I have a track record. Most banks and brokers are going to give me the time of day versus somebody who's a little bit newer. I wouldn't say they won't do the deal with you, but they're still wanting to see your resume, and you might not be able to finance it. So I can help in that instance. And it's just a win-win, because you have the property, I'm looking for properties, and I have the skill. So let's work together and get it done, and I'll make some money.
Love it. Love it. This year's been kind of crazy. I know for me personally, like I'm struggling to find as many deals as I'd like to buy. I'd be interested for you to weigh in on that if you're having a similar experience, and then maybe dig in a little bit deeper about what you want to buy as your next deal. You went through your buying criteria, but specifically, so any brokers tuning in out there, or any potential bird dogs are driving by going, hey, that's a Johanson special right there.
Yeah. No, I like that. Yeah, I mean, it's been a tough last, year and a half. We went through a lot of struggles with COVID. Luckily, we didn't lose one tenant to COVID, so we were excited about that. We had to work with a few, but we actually ended up doing, I think, 5 renewals during COVID, and we signed like 5 or 6 leases. So there was still activity going on, and we were still prospering. We had to help out, like I said, a few people, but that is what it is. I sold a lot of stuff in 2020 and into early 2021, just kind of preparing from what I believe is going to be somewhat of a downturn. Who knows? I don't have a crystal ball or anything like that, but just things seem a little eerily like 2005. So I'm just taking a couple of chips off the table. I still have some good stuff in portfolio, but kind of got rid of some of the stuff that we had already executed. And now what I'm looking for is, that Johanson special that Shawn kind of talked about, those smaller strip malls. But some of the things that I've kind of went outside that box recently is I just bought a gas station, what was it, last year? And it was mispriced out there in the market a little bit. We were able to identify it. One of my partners actually was able to identify it. He brought it to me, and we said, let's go for it. And we went through the due diligence and everything. And before we even closed on the deal, we were able to get an offer from another broker to buy it from us. So we actually ended up selling that in like 73 days for a pretty good profit. More of those deals would be great. I know those are kind of unicorns, but they're out there every day. You see things. If you know your market, look for these types of deals and bring them to me if you find them, because I'm doing that. Anything like that, seller financing, anybody that's motivated to sell, I want to deal with them.
So then do you want to get into that a little bit more? Like what makes a deal attractive to you today? Like how do you decide, whether to pass on something or, hey, I'm plowing forward with due diligence. Like this is what I'm really excited about. I know for me, it feels like 1 out of 100 look super interesting.
Yeah. And I've been going through a ton of deals recently that, on the surface, it looks great, but then you get into it and, I do a Google map, first, and I kind of drive the market because I'm not going to waste my time going out to, the property to look at it. So I drive around and look at it on Google, and maybe the ingress and egress or the way in and out, if you don't understand those, isn't ideal. Like maybe you have to go around the back and then come in, which surprisingly, that was my first retail deal that I did. I learned that lesson the hard way that, I need to have good ingress, egress. That one worked out well for us, but it's something that's very important. If your customers can't get in and out of the deal or out of the shopping center, it's going to be harder to attract those tenants to that building. So that's one of the big things that I look for. And who's coming to that center, look at the surrounding area and see what's driving traffic to that center. If it's out in the middle of nowhere and there's no housing and there's just one road, I probably don't want to buy that, and then it's the motivation of the seller. I mean, that's the biggest part right now is I'm putting in LOIs and sellers are still, wanting to get that top dollar for their deal. And, some of them are getting it, some of them aren't, but, I'm putting in LOIs based on my criteria and to try and be safe for what could happen in the future if interest rates rise. I'm looking at all these things.
Yeah. You kind of made me think about your week to week a little bit. Do you want to share or give a little behind the scenes on, you've done enough transactions now, you've got a net worth, you've got cash flow coming in, like you don't have to do this anymore, but you do. Because you enjoy it to some degree. Like, what is it that you do week in and week out versus maybe what your vendors or your partners or your other people do? How are you spending your time personally, and like what else happens in the portfolio?
Yeah, I mean, I think especially right now,
other than golf. Sorry.
Other than golf, yes, I do like to golf. Yeah, I mean, I think it's really right now what we're focusing on is strengthening our team. Like I said, we've sold a lot of stuff, so we have a little bit more time in kind of shoring up the back end, I guess, of what we're doing. So that's what we've been working on with our team a lot, is trying to search out, like right now we're looking for a marketing person to go out and do Facebook ads for us to try and find leases and to find deals. And that's one of our big focuses on here. We've subscribed to a couple of different apps to kind of make our back end even better, to try and lease and whatnot. I think both you and I subscribed to Resquared. It was was one of the tools that we looked into this year to help us lease out buildings. So those are just some of the things that I'm trying to make more efficient, to be able to get to those tenants, to get to those property owners that want to sell. So I don't, as much as I love my brokers, I love being able to get that straight deal to, owner to owner kind of a thing, and just talk business and come to a good agreement that's going to work for both of us. And so, I mean, that's really what we're focused on right now is trying to go direct to those people. But along with that, I'm also reaching out to my bankers. I'm reaching out to my brokers and saying, hey, I'm open for business. I want a deal at this point. And if things go crazy and the market goes like I think it's going to be, please keep me in mind, because I've got cash sitting on the sideline. I've got investors just bugging me to get in on a deal. I mean, you can't even imagine the calls that I get from my investors, like, when's the next deal? When's the next deal? And I keep telling them, like, look, like, we're not going to just buy a deal to buy a deal. We want to buy the right deal. So,
which, I mean, it feels so crazy out there right now, because I'm watching deals trade at prices that just are mind blowing to me, at margins that are so razor thin. There's so much capital chasing so few deals. I think I share similar sentiments. It's like, boy, we would love to be buying something, but we want to buy the right deal, right? It's like buying 4 or 5 mediocre deals or one that doesn't go well versus buying one great one, and you can end up in the exact same place with a lot less brain damage. Ask me how I know, right? Let's end on this note, because you're a deal making machine. You've been such an inspiration, not just for me, but to like a lot of the folks who are, transitioning from residential to commercial. I know, it took me a few years to really get into a groove, and so I looked at you and I was like, man, Shawn has been able to look what you've been able to build. It's incredible. What are you most excited about with respect to real estate investing, for this next year or two? Is there anything particularly that you're just like, man, it's going to be awesome?
Excited. That's a good question. I think really what I'm excited about is just really, honing in the business. It's so long I've just been, deal, trying to find the next deal, and then you close on a deal and you execute your plan. And it, as much as I kind of did focus on the back end, I didn't really. And so honing that in and getting a well-oiled machine so that like when we find that perfect deal, it's like, we can pounce on it and we can get it done, and we're executing, we're reading documents, we're reading leases, we know exactly this goes here, and it's really fitting those puzzle pieces in and getting efficient so that when the deal comes in, I'm excited about that. I'm excited for, potentially some really good deals and some seller financing deals coming back. If we hit that little bit of a downturn or maybe a big downturn, I don't want to see anybody suffer, but at the end of the day, we've had a really long, good run. And if you look at trends, we should be hitting a downturn just from an overall market anyways. So I'm looking forward to being able to get in and do some creative financing deals and get back to the stuff that you and I are really good at. And I know you've been really good at the seller financing deals too. So.
We got one more question here, probably that we have time for, from RJ. So what do you like about retail versus other asset classes?
I think I talked a little bit about that before. Retail it's just a different animal. I mean, like I said, the people are, the businesses in there want to keep up the asset versus like, let's say residential where, sometimes you get bad tenants and they trash your unit and you got to go in there and you got to fix it. I like that it's longer term deals. Usually we're signing 5, 7, 10-year deals and just set it and forget it at that point. I just did a renewal with a guy that had a 10-year deal. We were down to 3. We just bumped him back up to 10 because he loves being at the center and we love having him there. So now I don't have to worry about that anymore. And I can move on to the next vacancy or whatever else versus, in apartments, you got to keep moving people in and out. Industrial, I don't mind industrial actually. I wouldn't mind doing an industrial deal. Those are kind of a set it and forget it kind of things too. I think small bay warehouse is great. We've invested with other people in doing some mobile home parks. We just sold one last year, which was kind of interesting. And then we've done some self-storage with some other people too. So retail, I guess, to getting back to it, it's what I know. It's great. It's set it and forget it kind of a leases and maintenance kind of a thing. So that's why I really love retail, but I wouldn't be opposed to going in other assets either.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And RJ, I might add to that, when we do a lease in retail, it's a lot of heavy lifting up front. Sometimes you're, grinding through a 40-page lease with attorneys involved, and it takes a long time to fill that vacancy and sign a deal compared to some of the other asset classes. But then once you're done, you're pretty much done, and there's not a whole lot of anything that happens for like you said, maybe 5, 7, 10 years. And so do that upfront work, but immediately the day we sign that lease, all that value is created with the building. In some cases, you can get some cap rate compression, the whole thing. So,
well, and the other thing that I didn't even mention either, you get the value of the day one, but banks also like to finance some of the TI and stuff like that too. We go to our bankers and say, look, we've got this Chipotle or whatever, a dentist in there, and they want $50 a square foot in tenant improvement money. Would you, maybe do some of the finance on that? And they'll do 75, 80% of the financing. So you only have to come up with 25 or 20% of those costs to get this really good tenant in to, maybe make your building worth $1 million, $2 million worth more than what you bought it for. And so that excites me versus, in residential, you have to season everything to get it to, to be that value.
Great point. Great point. Shawnee, I'm going to put up your personal cell phone number so the entire world has it. Oh, just kidding. There's your email. I think who are folks who might want to think about networking or reaching out to you on LinkedIn or shooting you an email? Who should say hello?
Yeah, I mean, I love making new relationships with brokers, bankers, anybody that I love community banks. I love credit unions, any people that, represent them. Let's start a relationship. I try to stay loyal to the guys that I have, but it's always nice to have a couple of contacts in different areas. I'm breaking into new areas too. And then I guess final is anybody that's interested in, doing the commercial deals. If, maybe you want to partner on a deal or you want to invest or, anything like that, I'm open to talking.
Cool. Awesome, brother. Well, thanks for jumping on. This was fun. This is long overdue. The Shawn and Shawn show is now officially complete. I appreciate your time. Thank you, everyone who tuned in. And if you guys have follow-up questions for Shawn, go ahead and drop them in the comments, and I'm sure he can jump on LinkedIn or Facebook later and answer more of those, or maybe there'll be a follow-up episode. We'll see here. Thanks, buddy. Good to see you. Take care.